Welcome to the Elevate Within podcast. I'm your host, Megan Ulsgaard, manifesting coach and intuition development expert. I'm here to help you fire up your intuition, up-level your mindset, co-create with the universe, and supercharge your manifesting abilities so that you can create a life that is truly elevated. I believe you are so incredibly powerful that nothing can stand in your way. It's your time to achieve that enormous goal that you've kept hidden for far too long. You're ready to go after everything you want and truly become unstoppable. It's time to upgrade your life from the inside out. Get ready to be elevated within every single day and attract the life that you are truly passionate about. Let's do this. What if I had a step-to-step guide with everything you need to get started working with your intuition and learning how to manifest? That would be pretty cool, right? Well, my friend, you're in luck. I have just the training for you. It's called Learn How to Work with Universal Energy to Manifest Quicker and Develop Your Own Intuitive Gifts. And it's yours for free. The masterclass will walk you through finding your own special intuitive abilities, how to receive signs from the universe, how your intuition helps you to manifest quicker, and the number one thing that prevents intuition development and how to bust through that barrier. My goal with this guide is to give you the tools that you need to go all in, working with your intuition and learning how to manifest with confidence. If you're thinking of tapping into your own intuitive abilities, but aren't quite sure where to start, or you're already working with your intuition, but you just aren't seeing the results you've expected by now, this is exactly what you need. Head over to infinitesoulblueprint.com/intuition to watch the masterclass and begin creating a life that you are truly obsessed with. infinitesoulblueprint.com/intuition. Welcome back to the Elevate Within podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking all about spiritual transitions. So how to know if you're going through a spiritual transition, what spiritual transitions are, and how to navigate through them if you are going through one. So we all have spiritual transitions at different points in our lives. And a lot of the times we choose these before we incarnate, before we come down to earth. So we choose when the major spiritual transitions will happen. And a lot of this depends on our natal chart. So we each have a specific natal chart from when we're born. So you may know your sun sign in astrology. So whether that's an Aries, a Libra, a Capricorn, whatever it is. But we have this whole natal chart where it shows us the different aspects that play into our lives. So we can often find spiritual transitions will happen during certain parts of those aspects. But what a spiritual transition is essentially a shift in your consciousness. Okay, so what you're doing is you're essentially expanding your consciousness, elevating your consciousness, opening up your consciousness. And what it does is it shifts you to a new spiritual level. So you may be at a certain level, and as you go through this spiritual transition, it shifts you to a new level. And often when we go through a spiritual transition, it can be super uncomfortable because a lot of things happen that, and we're going to go over those things in this episode, but a lot of things can happen that kind of don't seem like you're evolving spiritually. They kind of seem like everything's falling apart or everything's going wrong or what on earth is happening. So they can be disguised. So often we don't recognize them because they're disguised as something falling apart, something crumbling, something shifting. And our ego mind, our logical mind says, well, something is terribly wrong right here, but your higher self knows. Your higher self knows that everything's shifting so that you can go to this new spiritual level. So we go through these individually and we go through them collectively. And right now, in this time, August 2020, we're going through a huge spiritual transition collectively as well as individually. So since this, everything shifted earlier this year, you may have noticed that things are really shifted in your life. Whether that was a job, a relationship, your living circumstances, whatever it is, we have all been shifted. And it's part of our spiritual awakening. It's part of our spiritual transition. And then we can see it when we look out into the world. Things are changing. No, like things are changing. They will never go back to the way they used to be. But this is a really, really good thing. So we look out into the world, and right now it seems like chaos. It seems like confusion. It seems like everything is falling apart. But that's what a spiritual transition is. Everything falls apart so that it can be rebuilt. It can be rebuilt into the new. And the way I love to explain this is it's like a renovation project. So let's pretend that you are going to renovate your kitchen. So you can't just walk into your kitchen the next day and just have it completely new kitchen. That's not how it works. Usually what we have to do is we have to rip stuff down, right? So you might be ripping down the cupboards. You might be removing the flooring, basically making a big mess. And for a while, you may not even be able to use your kitchen. You're like, I can't even use it. Like there's nothing I can do right now. I just need to wait for the work to be done. And it's a big mess. Someone that comes into your house, and if they don't know that you're redoing your kitchen, they might look at it and be like, what on earth is going on? And they might be afraid, right? They might be like, oh, something happened to your kitchen. Okay, so if you think of them like your ego aspect, right? So your ego might be like, oh my gosh, something's going on. Your ego isn't always aware, right? This person isn't aware. But you're in the situation. Think of you like your higher self. And your higher self is like, yeah, I'm redoing my kitchen. So it has to get torn apart and then it will be rebuilt. Of course, it's no big deal. I know exactly what's going on. So if we can look at these different aspects in the same way as we go through the spiritual transition, right? The ego might start freaking out a little bit inside, and the ego might be like, what is happening? Things are falling apart. But your higher self may be super calm. Your higher self is like, I know that everything is shifting for the better, right? When you redo your kitchen, just like a spiritual transition, the old, you're getting rid of the old, right? The old is no longer working for you. You don't want this kitchen anymore. It's not working. That's why you're redoing it. You want something new, something beautiful, something brand new, new energy. And that's exactly what happens on the other side of a spiritual transition, right? We get the new stuff, the new energy, the new experiences, those things that are more in alignment with our soul. So it definitely can be confusing. And like I said, the ego can freak out a little bit, but there's certain times in our life that these spiritual transitions can, I don't want to say be forced upon us, but because our higher self agrees to them. So they're not actually being forced, but to the ego, they may seem forced. And different points in our life, like right now through the spiritual awakening, during eclipses are super powerful for moving us into a new spiritual level. Usually when things happen during an eclipse, you can't go back, right? It's like a new level. It's one of those things where if you aren't doing what your soul wants you to do, then the eclipse will basically do it for you. It's like, hey, you're not doing it, so I am going to move you to the direction that your soul wants that's actually going to make you happier, even though it seems scary, even though it's confusing. So we can have lots of these little spiritual transitions as well during different times too. Like the full moon is about us releasing. So we're releasing a lot of that old stuff. The new moon is about bringing in new beginnings. So those shifts are usually more subtle. It's not usually as extreme as the eclipses or as different points in your life, which can also reflect with your natal chart. So how do you know if you're going through one of these spiritual transitions? One of the ways is if everything feels like it's falling apart. So everything is crumbling, everything's falling apart. It kind of feels like everything is wrong. But you know deep down inside, you know it's for your highest good. So even though everything seems like it's falling apart, everything's in chaos, inside you're like, I know that this is happening for a reason. I trust that this is happening for a reason. So this is often triggered by something painful. Often we go through these spiritual transitions through painful events, not always, but that's often what triggers it. So it's often endings. Something's ending, something is shifting. And I like to explain it a lot like a breakup. So sometimes when we break up with people, it can be really painful. Something's ending. And it can feel really uncomfortable, but deep down inside, it's like, I know that this person isn't right for me. I know that this is actually the best thing for me. Even though it feels uncomfortable, even though I kind of might want to go back, I know I have this feeling that this is supposed to happen and I just have to get through this. And I know it's going to be so much more amazing on the other side. So another way to know if you are going through one of these spiritual transitions is that nothing that you do really changes your circumstances. So even with diligent effort, so your law of attraction manifestations might not be happening quite as much, even though you're doing the work. That is because there's some resistance between your higher self and your ego. Okay, so your higher self wants you to transition. So during these times, I find that if we're trying to create something and we're not connected to our higher self, or we're just trying to create it through the ego, then we won't have the same results as if we're following our higher self. So you may be trying to do something and, just thinking, this is the way I have to go. This is the direction I have to go in, but nothing's changing. And it's like, that's the time to stop and evaluate. Okay, what is going on? What does my higher self actually want me to do right now? Because for some reason, I'm not moving forward. Like this, I'm doing everything I possibly can and nothing's changing. Okay. So that's when we start to do those things like meditating, looking for answers, quieting our mind, or really trying to pick up on that intuitive information, right? You can do so many different tools to help you to see which direction you need to go in, what's going on. Some other amazing tools that I like to use are oracle cards. Okay. So our oracle cards always tell us what's going on, even though we don't always want to know, or I should say, even though it's not always the card that we want, it will be honest. So your oracle cards will show you which direction you're currently going in, what energy is currently happening. So if you're trying to do all this effort and nothing's happening, you can consult your oracle cards and just be like, hey, is something going on here? Do I need to close this chapter of my life and start something new? What is going on, right? So that's another great way. You can also work with your spiritual team. You can ask them, just say like, can you please show me which direction I'm supposed to go in? My efforts aren't working, so please provide me with some signs of what I should do, right? Just going with the flow and surrendering. So just saying, you know what, for now, even just for now, I'm going to release this thing that is not working, right? Because my effort is not working right now. So I'm just going to surrender it to the divine and just let it go. Even if it's temporary, because it is hard to let go, but just almost pull yourself out of the situation, take a step back and almost look from the outside in, right? Look from an observer point of view instead of someone being in the situation. That'll help you to see what's going on, right? Often it's because you're transitioning to something different. And like I said, your ego doesn't quite know, but your higher self knows. And it's scary for the ego because the ego can't see the steps ahead. The ego only knows past experiences. Okay. So your higher self can see future. It can see infinite past. It knows everything. It can see it all. It has a bird's eye view. But your ego is like, I only know what's happened in the past, and that's how I base my information. So it might be a little bit scary to the ego just because it can't see the current steps. But if you trust, go with the flow, and surrender, then it will make the transition a lot easier. So another way to know if you're going through a spiritual transition is if you're experiencing some negative emotions. I don't particularly like to say any emotions are negative, but the way that they're perceived through our 3D human experience is that certain ones are negative, okay? So those ones might be hopelessness, grief, anger, depression, loss of control. So if you're experiencing any of those particular emotions, you might be going through a spiritual transition. And usually what that means is, like, for example, if it's anger, you might be resisting the process. So your ego might be like holding on for dear life and you're resisting the process. You're like, I do not want to go in this different direction. This is where I want to stay, and almost becoming resentful that the process is happening. And that might cause some anger, right? So you're feeling resentful, you're feeling angry. You're like, I don't want to do this, right? Our personality self wants to have things a certain way. Once again, that's about releasing that ego and going with the flow. Also, if we like to be in control as humans, it's hard not to be in control, right? It's like we want to control everything. We want to control our life. We want to control the things that go on, but sometimes we can't. What we can control is ourself, our emotions, the actions we take, the thoughts we think. We can control ourselves, which is actually the most powerful thing because that's how we're creating our reality, right? From the inside out. Everything's created from the inside out. So we actually have a lot of control, but it may feel like we're losing control, especially for transitioning to a new level. So if you're transitioning to a new spiritual level, it might feel like a little bit like you don't have control, right? It's like a ride. Think of it like a roller coaster ride where you don't have control. You're just in the seat and the ride is just going along and, it's taking you to new heights and it's kind of fun. It's kind of scary, but you are not in control of that ride. So it's similar to that. But once you get through this, you're going to be on such a better place on the other side. So even though there might be some resistance, there might be some hopelessness, some anger, those things that come up, it's going to be so much better on the other side. And if you can just tell yourself that will help to ease that resistance. That will help to make the transition smoother. So as you're transitioning, these emotions, especially the emotions may come up, grief, anger, fear, all those, as a way to be released. So often we get really busy, right? We're busy in this life. We're doing things, we're working, we got kids, whatever it is. So sometimes we tend to stuff down our emotions, or we can stuff down our emotions. We can do different behaviors like overeating, drinking alcohol, distracting ourselves through Netflix, whatever it is. But these emotions, they don't want to be stuffed down. Okay, they are going to hurt you if they're stuffed down because they're just going to be eating away at you and be like, I want to be released. I want to be acknowledged. I want to be looked at. So if you are experiencing these emotions, it's actually a really, really good thing because it's saying they're coming up to the surface now to be released. Okay, otherwise you wouldn't feel them if they weren't coming up to be released. So I always think anytime that we experience negative emotions is actually a really, really good thing because we're releasing something. Every time you experience that negative emotion, it's helping you in some way, whether it's helping you to define what you don't want, so therefore you know what you do want, whether it's releasing a negative emotion, whether it's bringing awareness to something that's going on in your life so that you can change it. They're all beneficial to us. So the best way you can do this is just inviting these emotions to flow through you, looking at them. Sometimes emotions just want to be acknowledged. So if you think of it like a little kid, if a little kid isn't getting enough attention, they might cry and cry and cry, and then you give them some attention and they're perfectly fine. And you're not really doing anything, you're just being there with them, right? Just being there with them is sometimes enough. And that's how our emotions work too. Just be there with them. Just allow them to be there, allow them to be in your experience, and you'll find that they pass through you so much faster when you just allow them to be there, acknowledge them, and don't push them away, right? Because if you say, you're not a part of me, I don't want you, then you're essentially pushing away a part of your experience. So just saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to be an observer and I'm just going to observe this emotion. I'm going to try my best to step outside of, how this emotion is making me feel and just observe it. What does it want to show me? And journal. What is this emotion showing you? Is this showing you, you might get some amazing new ideas, some epiphanies. You may be able to release something that you've been holding on to for years and years and years, or even lifetimes. So really looking at the emotions and allowing them to be there. Okay, so another way to know if you are going through a spiritual transition is that things are ending. So we kind of went over this, but usually, or not usually, always, if we start something new, something has to end. Okay, so we can't have a whole bunch of new stuff. We just don't have room for all new, right? We have to end something. And during a spiritual transition, we're ending something that is no longer working, even though we may not even be aware that it's not working. So you may not even be 100% aware that something isn't working or that something can be so much better. So you may notice that things end, and sometimes they're things that, often they're things that we want, but sometimes they're things that we don't want. So you may be like, I didn't want this thing to end, right? I actually liked this thing. And at first, it may seem kind of like a slap in the face, like, what did I do wrong to cause this? But really, it's really making room for something better. It's always making room for something better, something new. So energy is always in motion. Things are always shifting and moving. And once you end this thing, even though it may be difficult, something new will enter, right? Whether that's a job, a relationship, a home, or just something completely out of the blue that comes at you abruptly. Just know you may not see the evidence the next day. You may not see it the next week, but fast forward 1 month, 2 months, you'll be able to see how it played out, right? You'll be able to look back and see, okay, if I didn't have this ending, then I wouldn't have been able to have this new beginning. So those are all signs that you're shifting into a new spiritual level. You're expanding your consciousness. You're really raising your vibration into a new spiritual level. So I like to go over these because, like I said, often it can seem really scary. It can seem overwhelming. And if you are digging for answers, then that's a very, very good indication that you are going through a spiritual shift, right? When we have these spiritual shifts, that's when we dig for answers. That causes us to dig deep inside of ourselves and say, what's going on? Question things. What is happening? And that's a really good thing. It's getting us to look at those things so that we can release them. So just know that it's for the best. And many of these events are fated as well. Many of them your higher self is choosing. So your higher self is like, I want you to have this experience. Like, you and your higher self are one. I'm just kind of speaking like they're different, but your higher self wants you to have this experience because your higher self wants to have this joy. Your higher self is all about joy. It's all about new experiences. It's all about following your heart and finding those things that really align with your soul. So just understanding that even though it's uncomfortable, even though things might seem scary, it will all bring in new beginnings, and it will all be so much better on the other side. And the best way to get through a spiritual transition is to allow it to happen, to not resist it, not push against it, allow it to be there, really dig deep within yourself, look at what's going on, search for those answers, listen to your intuition, journal whatever you're getting, and really dig deep into your soul. So thanks so much for listening, and I will see you on the next podcast. Thank you for spending time with me on the Elevate Within podcast. I appreciate you being here with me. If you could take one moment to share this episode on social media, tag me in it, or share it with someone personally that you think would love this, that would be absolutely amazing. Also, if you're loving this podcast, be sure to share it with me by leaving a review on iTunes and by subscribing to this channel so I can keep providing you with content that will truly leave you elevated within. I can't wait to connect with you on the next show.